Life. Right now! Come here, you! Pronounce calling you! Up, up! Life is what you make it. So come here, my dear.
Welcome to Island Hope International, Life as We Know It podcast, where we live it fully every day. And today we'll be talking about Black lives, racial injustice, systemic racism, and just life as we know it today in America. Joining me in this discussion, I have the CEO of Island Hope International, Alicia Bryan, as well as my close friend, Tamar Burke. So say hello to everyone, guys.
Hi.
Hi, thanks for joining me in this discussion.
Oh, you're welcome. Hi, my name is Tamar Burke. I'm currently a grad student at Morgan State University. I'm studying my graduate degree of public health, master's in public health. I'm also a mother of a almost 2-year-old and a wife.
I'm Alicia. I'm the CEO of Island Hope International. I'm also a nurse practitioner and pursuing my doctoral degree in healthcare leadership. I am very enthused about this topic and really would love to see change occur this year.
Thank you, guys. Well, I'm Shazan, and I'm your host for this podcast episode. And I'm a medical student in Washington, D.C. And honestly, this is something that affects everyone. So I just thought it was a great opportunity for us, as Black women, Caribbean women as well, to have our voice heard in this discussion. So the first question I have for you guys is, how often do you think about race or your racial and ethnic identity?
So before moving to the United States, it wasn't something that I thought about a lot, really. I just knew I was Black, pretty much. But moving here was definitely an eye-opener for sure. I identify myself as Afro-Caribbean. And there are some cases that I don't think about race a lot, but sometimes I do. For example, like at my place of work, previously I was the only Black person working there. On some occasions, it was blatant, and in some, it was like, okay, I'm just like another staff member. You know what I mean? So I guess the environment makes me think about it, and the circumstance, and just things that are going around. But I mean, I just know who I am. But I guess sometimes, like your environment or the circumstance makes you realize it more than anything else.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I had the same experience. I mean, growing up in Jamaica, first of all, you're all Jamaican, like first and foremost. That's all that you are. Like everyone is Jamaican, right? It's not about, and yes, there is colorism. I'm not saying there isn't colorism. There definitely is. But first and foremost, we're all Jamaican. Everyone's Jamaican, Black, white, Chinese, So, and majority of the people are Black, African descent. And so, again, I had the same experience. It wasn't until coming here where it was like, oh, I'm different,
Well, for me, race was never an issue until I was when I entered 7th grade. And that's where it really hit home for me. And more so as I continued on with my post-secondary studies, especially graduate school, I would notice that I would always be the youngest and one of a handful, literally a handful, if that much, whether it be at conferences or in my actual program, in my class. Like most of my classes that I have had with this particular degree I'm in, it'll be one or two colored persons, not necessarily those who identified as Black, biracial, mixed, what have you. And it would always be startling to me. I would feel out of place sometimes. I would want to identify with people, but it's kind of hard to do so when, there's so many different factors: age, experience, race, and culture.
Yeah, I do notice that, as you, or at least in the States where we are, as you kind of move further up, you start to see, whether it's in education or your workplace, you start to see less and less, people that look like you or people of color. And I guess this kind of brings into the topic of like diversifying the workforce. Any thoughts on that, Alicia?
Yes, the workforce needs to be diversified. When I took my very first nursing job, I am trying to think right now, and I cannot recall seeing anyone in leadership, not as a charge nurse, but as like an actual manager or someone with actual experience, like an actual leadership executive role, being a person of color, only on the night shift. And it'll be one or two persons. But that's where I would see mostly, especially in the ER, you'll see more colored people, more Black persons on the night shift being in charge, or even just being staff. So that just paints a whole different picture from day to night, literally, and it's important for patients to, and people in general, to be able to identify with someone. So diversity is a beautiful thing. It's not meant to um, erase someone else's work ethic or say one person's better than the other. It just means, we accept everyone. The song goes, it's a little children's song, red or yellow, black and white, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. It's not about, okay, one color needs to be more noticed than the other, just everybody, the whole rainbow, the whole spectrum.
It's very interesting to me that you said, like, people of color in leadership roles, in the ED or healthcare are often working, or you start noticing that they're working night shifts as opposed to day shifts. Sounds strategic, if you ask me.
What I think is strategic too is, and this can, this will like open like another conversation, but the fact that when you apply for jobs, they ask you what your ethnicity is or what your race is, what do you identify yourself as. If it doesn't matter, why ask it? You know what I mean? Like I could never like figure that out. So for me, I think that they just want to at least have one Black person here, or one person of color here or there to say, oh, we are diverse. You know what I mean?
Exactly, which is why sometimes I don't even answer, because it's not something that is mandatory. It's more of a compliance thing with the government to say that we're an equal opportunity employer. And I hate the race and ethnicity question, because it does not truly depict who the person is. Most of the times it's 3 or 4 options. There's no option to identify with more than one race or put other. And you're lumped into one sum, especially I hate the Hispanic, having Hispanic there. Hispanic is not a race, it's an ethnicity. Don't mix it in with the racial questions. Any person of any racial origin can be Hispanic. But yet, here we want to further divide, the race tensions and the ethnic tensions, and say Hispanics are a whole different person. They're white, which really is not the case.
And to add to, the discussion, like, why are they asking for a race on all these applications? Basically, every single application you fill out, they ask for your race or ethnicity. And, the reasoning behind it may be, to, diversify, whatever, to make sure you include, like Tamar was saying, one here, whatever. But I don't know if you saw this post going around on social media, and I reposted it, where it listed maybe like 15 top corporate companies and how many like Black executives they had at those companies. And you notice every single one, if they had a Black executive, what was their title? It was like director of diversity or urban marketing, or just, like, come on, Black people are not just there to fill out these quotas, like Alicia was saying, these government quotas or whatever. Why are Black people the only top executive level positions are those? Like, why is that? Not a question for you guys, but just in general,
Yeah, chief diversity or officer of inclusion, and these made up titles recently to combat all the discrimination that's going on. You see it in Starbucks, just to name a few, in all these big conglomerates. And I don't necessarily think that Black persons of African descent needs to be the one to fill that role, because there's racism, racial tensions between every other racial ethnic minority group. You know, we could put a Japanese person there, for example. Japanese in America went through a hell of a thing, you know, and that doesn't get talked about at all. You know, even the Holocaust, like certain schools are cutting that out of the education. We need not to just focus necessarily on one racial group. Yes, blacks in this country, African Americans in the United States went through the most horrendous thing, and they're still going through it. But if we're going to truly diversify and be inclusive, we need to talk about these things that have been swept under the rug. Talk about the natives, the Native Americans, the Trail of Tears. Even the other day, there one tribe was being decommissioned from their status. We need to talk about these things.
But you know, like we can't, when we're having discussions with our peers, we can't get into the habit of comparing each other's pain. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but to equate the Holocaust to slavery, there's no comparison. What happened during the Holocaust was horrendous and unimaginable. However, slavery in the United States of America was the African Holocaust, because even after slavery was ended, we still had things going on. There was still experimentation going on. You know, you have the syphilis, whole syphilis thing going on, Tuskegee Airmen and all that other stuff. We had the heel, how do you say the word, heel cells from the lady?
Yes, HeLa cells, and
There you go.
and you were talking about the Tuskegee trials.
Yeah, you know, from that we got the whole ethics committee, the IRB and whatnot. But we're still having testing done to minorities. We're going to minority countries to do vaccination trials and stuff like that, because our stuff, our ethics don't really matter because it's not our jurisdiction legally. But we still need to recognize these atrocities that are going on. You know, yeah, they had gas chambers and stuff like that, but slaves had whips, they had lynchings, they had branding, they were separated from their families just like the people in the Holocaust, you know, just merely for their skin. And not only were they separated, they were also separated by skin pigmentation.
So piggybacking off of what you just said, I think that one thing or one reason why they compare as well is because they don't know. They aren't educated in knowing what slavery actually was, what actually happened, how people were treated, how most of the slaves some of the slaves that they got from Africa didn't even make it to the US because of the living conditions that they had on the ship. So it's like they don't even know really what happened and, you know, the conditions that people were living in. So they're like, oh, well, the Holocaust, yes. But we went through slavery. We got raped, killed, beaten, so many things. Like, you can have a kid and then your child is taken away from you and then become slave. Like, you can't even raise a family, can't even get married. Like, the things that happen in slavery, I mean, they just have to read up and they just have to get educated as well as to what happened, I think.
I agree, but I just want to move on. I have another question for you, Tamar, and Alicia. Feel free to answer as well. But does your racial or ethnic identity play a role in important decision making or daily decisions?
Definitely. Daily decisions, maybe not, but important decisions, yes. I remember when I was pregnant with my son, and a white lady at my workplace, she asked me if I had a name picked out. And we were like, yeah, we're thinking about a name, we're not sure yet. And she told me that I have to be careful with the name that I pick for him because society is going to look at him in a different way if he has a different kind of name. And to be honest, I got upset when I came home. And after talking to my husband and whatnot, it was true what she said, even though I got upset initially. And important decisions, yeah, like I had to take into consideration his race, my race, and the name that I would have to give him.
And Tamar, even, you know, just, you know that you're raising a Black man, like you're raising up this young baby boy to be a Black man in society. How do you think by the time he's grown, do you think things will be different? What are you doing as a mother, and how do you feel as a mother raising a young Black son?
I'm definitely fearful. Fearful in two ways. One, fearful what this society is going to be like 20 years from now. You know, Rome and I were talking the other day, like about the whole thing that happened with George Floyd and everything. And to be honest, I felt that. Like when he was crying out for his mother, I felt that. And like for the whole night, like I couldn't sleep. I really couldn't sleep because I was just thinking, like, 20 years from now, what is it going to be like? If he drives one of our cars, if he chooses to wear a hoodie, if he gets pulled over, like, what would happen to him if things stay the way that they are? But not only for him, but for my husband as well, who is Black. You know what I mean? Like, what if one day he calls me and he's like, hey, I'm pulled over by the police and I'll call you back after, and I don't hear from him? You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that, I am very fearful for. And even now, like trying to make sure that we take things into consideration, like I said before, like his name, making sure that he gets educated, making sure that he's well spoken, making sure that he goes to, you know, like a good school and stuff. But at the same time, it's like you can prepare them as much as you can, but society will play its part. And unfortunately, in many cases, that happens. No matter how much you try to prepare and protect, and you're fearful and you pray, society will come into play. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I'm just going to speak on the question as well. You know, does race or ethnicity play a role in daily decision making? I'm going to talk about that aspect. And it does, like, as you mentioned, your son or any Black man or even Black women have to be, we're taught, you know, not to wear certain things. We can't walk around wearing like dark colored hoodies. You know, we're taught to, you know, wear bright colors so we are seen as less threatening. That's a daily decision that you have to make, what to wear, you know, when you're walking down the street, how to just not, you know, how to make other people around you feel comfortable. I feel like we're constantly tasked with that. And even like working in the hospital, you know, things happen, like things happen. You feel like you're being, I can speak for myself. Sometimes you feel like you're being treated unfairly, you know, but you can't get angry. One, you're a professional. And two, it's like, oh, if you're angry, you're gonna be that angry Black woman. And I'm not saying everyone generalizes you like that, but it's definitely something you think about in those moments. You try to make sure you don't come off a certain way. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because even back to what you were talking about, like trying to choose what you wear each day, like even being stereotyped if you wear a hoodie. Like it's cold, you choose to wear a hoodie, but you have to second guess yourself. You know what I mean? Going into a store, making sure you take your hoodie off, making sure it's not like a black hoodie. It doesn't have something that has, you know, something across it that would be offensive to someone, or oh, they're gonna look at you that way. Like, yeah, definitely. And even as females too, it's like for us, you know, um, making sure that you don't wear, like in certain places, going for like a job interview, making sure that your hair is not too long, making sure your nails aren't too long, what you have on is not too short, not too long. You know what I mean? It definitely comes into play every day for sure.
Well, for me, I can't really say for everyday occurrence, but in terms of important decisions as to where I'm going to live, that plays a huge role. I was just speaking to someone about this yesterday. I'm like, I would never live in certain areas in the United States. There are only less than a handful of states, much less cities, that I would actually live in. You know, one, because I am a Black woman in America. Two, I'm a West Indian woman. So I need to have access to my culture, my food. I like this business of driving an hour or having people ship stuff to you. You know, I need to have, you know, something that represents me, you know, and keep that culture and identity going for future generations should I choose to have children here, you know.
I'm curious to know what states you would live in, what states you feel comfortable living in, because I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Um, and yeah, like I totally see and I understand what you're saying in terms of I wouldn't live certain places either. But when I heard about, you know, Breonna Taylor and her incident, and it not being, it's not the first incident of this kind, you know, where a police officer walked up into someone's home and it ended in a fatality, you know, an innocent person dying. And so to me, it's like you're not even safe in your own home, no matter where you are, not even in your own home are you safe. And Breonna Taylor, she was 26, she's a Black woman, she's like me, she wasn't even alone in her own home. So it just really, like, it just disturbed me. And literally, I could not sleep. Like, I just felt so sad and angry and just uncomfortable knowing that you're not even safe in your own home. So it's like, does it even matter where you live? You know?
And even what you were saying about Breonna Taylor, not only was she at home, she was asleep. She was asleep when they came in, no knock warrant, fired, I think it was 22 shots, and she was asleep. And when her boyfriend or husband or whoever I think he was there, he actually had a firearm and he fired, I think it was 1 shot, and they arrested him, trying to charge him with attempted murder when you don't even know who's coming in her place. And 22 shots, really? Like, and she was asleep.
Not only was she asleep, the point for that too is that yes, the man, her boyfriend, shot the officer, but he had no idea who he was, and it was a single shot that doesn't warrant 22 rounds. Not only did he shoot and kill Breonna, it also, some of the bullets ended up in the apartment next door, so endangering lives. Like, you have no regard for any life at all. But to answer your question, regards to what states I would live in, just certain states in the Northeast, certain parts of Florida, Miami. I live in California, but wouldn't want to. Probably around Houston, around the Houston, Dallas, Texas area. DC, I love DC. And that's pretty much it. Like, honestly, that's pretty much it. Because those areas, there are a lot of Caribbean people. Even if you're not Jamaican, at least some Caribbean nation, you know, you have the food similarities and be able to have some comforts of home. But even in those areas, you still have racial crimes, you know, non-person of color against persons of color crimes. Here in New York,
Eric Garner.
there you go. I can't breathe. You know, even the other day during the protest, so many like things going on. People are peacefully protesting. People are kneeling down with their hands up, and they're still getting knocked down. It just really, really hurts my heart. I rather
Literally, it's 1960s all over again.
1950s and 60s. This is why I say that this is like the new or the 21st century civil rights movement, part 2, because we as a people were never truly free. If you look at Lincoln, when he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, freeing slaves, that there were still gray areas because it was only applicable to certain areas, right? And even after there was this notion that everyone was free, you have the whole 2.5 years later until Texans found out that they were free, you know, and hence Juneteenth. But moving on past the Reconstruction, during the Reconstruction period, we're like, okay, we can't make any money now. What are we going to do? We can't have any white supremacy right now. What do we do? All right, so
Prison, convict, leasing.
Yeah,
3
so
words.
we're gonna have that. We're gonna have vagrancy laws. We're going to criminalize people because the 13th Amendment created a loophole. So you can only be treated as a slave if you are a criminal. So what are we going to do? We're going to punish people for minor things, for things that they have no control over. We're going to prevent them from doing certain things. There was a resurrection of the KKK. There was the Jim Crow laws, the Black Code, the redlining. And going back to your point about fathers being in the home, if you know, and separation of families, there is a complex there. You know, in the 50s, 60s, you'll see a Black family, nuclear family. But if you look at progression, when crack cocaine entered the scene in the 80s, and we're criminalizing the difference between crack cocaine and cocaine, and, you know, we're going to put stiffer punishments because this racial and ethnic group is using crack cocaine more than whites using cocaine.
Right, with the idea that because they're in a lower socioeconomic class, they're more inclined to commit serious crimes. But go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so we're going to take away these people and we're going to put them away. And who are they arresting mostly? The Black man.
Thank you for listening to today's Life as We Know It podcast. Remember, life is what you make it, so live it fully every day. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel so you get the notifications when new episodes are being posted.